On this episode, we discuss lessons from the CrowdStrike outage, IP lawsuits, and Zoomtopia. All that and more on EDTech. EDTech episode 123. Tired of hearing about AI? Hello, AV friends, and welcome to another episode of EDTech. As always, we have our awesome panel of higher ed AV professionals, Ernie Bailey. Hey, Ernie.
Hello, Aaron. How are you this morning?
I'm doing. And Rob Rasberry.
Hey, Aaron, the change of seasons finally seems to have happened, so.
Got to bust out those jackets. And Scott Tiner.
Hey, everyone. We've busted out our jackets up here in Maine a month or so ago. We had some frost on the ground today, so.
Chilly. But yeah, so we're just going to jump right into it this time. The first article that we read came to us from AVNation. Lessons from the CrowdStrike outage, a wake-up call for AV professionals. So what were the lessons learned from this CrowdStrike outage? What can we, in higher ed, with our classroom technology, like how, what can we do to improve our processes to keep the classroom technology secure and working?
Test offline before we bring it on. I think that was the biggest lesson that everybody learned from that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting when I read this, because I think that more and more in our industry, we're recognizing where IT and AV integrate together. And for something like this, when I read this, the first thing that came to my mind is ITIL's change management process. And whether you're using that to the real strict degree that they outline in the book, or you've got a more watered down version that works for you, you have to be doing some type of change management, which essentially means what Ernie just said. You come up with a solution, you test it, you make sure it works. The other things you have to have is a backup plan. If it doesn't, how do we go backwards from where this is? And then a documentation of what you've done. So if in 2 weeks down the road you realize there's a problem, you can pop right back to that original documentation and time it and figure out how it worked. And I think a lot of people are afraid of such a thing, right? The change management ITIL book is 200 pages and they're just like, oh, I could never possibly do that. You only have to implement it to the degree that it works for your organization. And I still don't quite get CrowdStrike because, they have to do some type of change management there. There's just no way they became the company they are without doing it. But certainly a good change management process prevents this type of thing.
It's interesting how that article sort of matched what we basically do when we plan something, checking the code versus checking the design, doing the stress testing, making sure you come up with your punch list, make sure everything's working, test it, have your backup. It was sort of interesting to see this completely IT-based thing sort of emulating what we do in AV. And we're like, well, we've told you all along, we sort of, cross stream, so to speak. So it was actually a very refreshing article talking about that. But, the other thing is, during the process, you need to have some kind of checklist going. Maintenance, I guess maybe is the word I'm looking for. So that, while the process is happening, somewhere in the background, you're checking to make sure maybe in off hours, does it work? Is it working properly? Is there something that we need to change? We always talk about, you have your test environment versus your production environment, that kind of thing happening as well. But I did enjoy this, although I must say, the day that happened, I was wondering, why aren't certain things working? What's going on? And then I saw that, I was like, oh, wow, this thing touches everything. So
yes.
That was fascinating article.
Yeah, I think, it shows us that even the best and the biggest can get complacent. You think of the old story about, the airline pilot who takes his checklist and checks every single thing and marks it on the clipboard before every single flight, even though he's done it for years. You still make sure you go down your list and you check every box. You don't just say, oh, I know that's fine. I think that's real easy to have happen. sure it's happened to all of us. We might mess up one or two classes if we do something like this. We don't shut down airlines and banks, but it's the exact same thing.
It's kind of the old, like, somebody doing an update at 4 o'clock on a Friday. Like,
we don't do updates on Fridays, period.
yeah, it's like, timing stuff appropriately. But I think the Rich Fregosa said, there was a quote in there, and he said about being complacent. And I think that probably is exactly what happened, because, as opposed to those, airline pilots that, even though they've done it for years and years, they still go through that checklist. Well, probably somebody got a little too confident and was like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Send, and blew it all up. But there's, I think, making the somewhere there was definitely a QA failure somewhere. Like, somebody didn't test something, because when you send out a firmware update, usually you test it on one thing first before sending it to all of them. So I found it very interesting that something snuck through on that scale, and nobody saw it sooner. But
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'd still love to know the full story, because it just doesn't completely add up. And the one thing I wonder about, because I do this often, I have to remind myself about it, is that I'll be testing something, and I do it so often and all the time that something weird will come up, and I'll be like, yeah, whatever, just click. And it's like, but wait a minute, somebody else would get stuck by that, or maybe that's telling me that there's something. You also get complacent to the little tiny errors or the little weird things that happen that you should be paying more attention to, and you just forge ahead because that's how technology works. So you just click that button. And so I wonder if something like that is what happened. It was like, oh, I tested it on one machine. Yeah, I remember something weird happening, but it seemed to work, so I just kept going.
Or it's like the millions of compile errors, but you're like, oh, that's just
yes,
they're always there. So, but then there was that one in the middle that nobody was paying. That's the one that affected everything. Let's move on to the next one. This piece came to us from AV Magazine on avinteractive.com. Barco enforces ClickShare IP against Yealink in Europe. So what is the type of impact that these sorts of cases, brought to court, can have on higher ed when, one company sues another?
I mean, I think it certainly would, if you pay attention to it, it would really make you think, boy, I better be using the actual product. I better be using the Barco product and not the Yealink product, because they may get sued. I don't know that it's possible to do that, right? I mean, nobody knew Yealink was going to get sued until Barco sued them. And so many of these products we use look like so many of these other products we use. It's another thing, as I read this, I was just like, obviously Barco, as they said here, right, they've got a department that does just this, because this isn't the first time they've done this over ClickShare. So there's a reason they do it, and there's something that they've got patented or copyrighted that is unique to them, that gives them the ability to actually sue. Because, like I said, so many of these products are alike that I don't know how you would ever determine if you've got a stolen copyright product that you end up using in your institution.
I mean, we went through this several years ago with ceiling microphones. And, I thought I bought the original one. We bought it was the Shure ceiling mic. And then I believe it was Sennheiser came out and sued them, after the first round of shipments went out. And we had installed 2 or 3 early ones. And, basically we lost support for those devices, was what happened. We haven't had any issues, but no updates either. But I thought, and from seeing them at trade shows and talking to them, I thought Shure came up with the technology. I thought they were the first ones with this because they were, the ones that everybody saw. Well, no, it turned out that I believe it was, like I said, I think it was Sennheiser, ended up suing them, and it went off the market. I don't remember there being a big fight from Shure when that happened. Maybe a quick confession, an apology, and they went away. But you've got to stop and think, what do I do? Do I have to go out and buy new products? After spending several $1,000s per classroom for this one device, do I have to do it again? Fortunately, it wasn't something that they could turn off. It's just, I think the ruling was you can't sell any more without changing your technology. So, but I think we'll see the same thing here. I don't use either one of these products. We try to avoid the dongle type devices. They get real expensive when you have visiting instructors come through and accidentally drop one in their briefcase or backpack at the end. That happens 2 or 3 times. And so we try to avoid that and try to find other alternatives. But I can easily see, how this could cause problems and, what's going to happen to the people who have bought the Yealink.
Yeah, I have to see. I don't know if we have a couple of those on. I'm not sure what we have. I know we have some Yealink, but what's interesting also is in the article, if I'm not mistaken, Yealink admitted it, that there was. So that's like, wow. Normally you get this big legal battle going back and forth. Oh, we didn't, and then it's decided, no, we decided that you infringed on it, but it looks like Yealink admitted it. So it's like, what were you trying to get away with here? I guess you figured nobody was going to, follow up and say, hey, that's our stuff. So I found that curious. Where is that the sign of a company thinking that you're all powerful and you don't have to worry about that kind of thing? The other, I guess, issue with this is, the Yealink displays and products are really good. And they come from China. And what kind of impact is that going to have? Okay, here we have, a Chinese company. They admitted they did an infringement. How is that going to look, from a larger perspective? As far as how it impacts us in higher ed, it makes you either change your choice or decide, what's what. But it certainly obviously gives, Barco and, gives them, hey, we're the original, we're the best, we're the, stick with us, that kind of thing. And we like Ernie, like what you said, you don't know. We had a number of Clear One, microphones, and they also had some kind of legal thing going on. So it's sort of hard up front to know who's doing what. And then you're dropped into the middle of this legal battle, and what is your recourse? If the company's going to do right, they're going to say, okay, we'll take care of this for you. If they don't, they're just going to, you're sort of stuck,
Yeah. Well, and think of it. So many products we're buying as services now. What if someone sued Zoom and said you stole our technology and they turn off our platform? It's one thing to not sell us any more of this device and not provide any updates to it. It'll work as long as it works. You'll get your return on investment, or get close to it anyway. But if it was a service that you bought, what recourse do you have? If they say you have to turn off your servers.
So I guess I'll have to say, check with your general counsel to see what they say. That's a good step.
I guess with the global market, it's got to be kind of difficult, especially because patent laws don't spread across the whole world. It's very localized to certain countries or continents or geographical areas. It's got to be more and more difficult for some companies, which I can imagine like that Barco has a department to keep an eye on all of that. But I would imagine that potentially if your market is predominantly Asia, you may be like, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Don't look under the hood, but here's our product. I could see how that potentially could be kind of tempting. But thinking all of this, would would a lawsuit or a company being sued kind of deter you from wanting to buy their products in the future?
I was about to go there. If something like this came up for us and we had seen that on one product, I would look at the other offerings from Yealink or whoever. They admit they stole from Barco. How do we know they didn't steal something else? And that's going to be stopped also. And, how much original work do they do? I mean, that has to come across the mind of the buyers or their distributors,
Yeah, especially this case where they were like, "Oh, okay, you caught us in the United States, but let's see how long it takes you to catch us in another part of the world." It's clearly they were just like, "Let's see how many of these we can sell before we have to stop selling them."
Yeah.
So it wasn't an honest mistake.
Yeah, I think it would definitely require more of at least a relatively deep dive to look into a company and be like, is it going to be worth us putting our money there in the future? Like, I mean, sure. Or any of the other mic companies that, had to pull product. Because it was maybe a one-off, I think it's, if it's a company that has a big reputation that you've used a lot in the past, maybe it's easy to be like, well, all right, we'll move along this one. But I guess it's kind of, you'd have to keep an eye on it to see if this is a one-off or a pattern of behavior from a company. Well, this last article is written by Steph Beckett over at Rave Pubs. Zoomtopia 2024, why I'm tired of hearing about AI and what we should be focusing on instead. This was a good one. What were the biggest impacts that came out of Zoomtopia for higher ed?
I mean, I didn't attend. I know some of my colleagues who did attend. They had kind of a similar take as Steph, which was it was very AI heavy. Interestingly enough, she kind of says it a little bit here. The other thing I heard is it was very very scripted, almost boring. All the things that they saw. And I think I definitely agree with Steph's concept that when she says, I'm tired of hearing about AI, what I'm really tired of hearing about is AI that does things that we don't really need. And I say that more and more because I use AI for things more and more as I learn more about it. I can upload spreadsheets of assets and tell it to go out and tell me lifespans, warranty dates, some actual useful stuff that takes it about 10 seconds that would take me about a week. Coming up with some of this AI stuff that they're having to do here, we'll make an agenda for you. I mean, I don't need you to do that. And if you did, you're going to save me 3 minutes of time. I need something that's going to save me a week of time. So that's where I'm tired of hearing of AI.
Yeah. We play a fine line with AI here on our campus. Our researchers are using it a lot, and we've actually got a division doing a whole lot with it and how it can apply to research and things like that. But at the same time, they're keeping it away from patient care. That's a big rule here. And, so anybody involved in any type of patient care is not supposed to have anything AI. If we try to use it like on Zoom or Teams or anything like that, using any of these pieces they add on, our IT security office and our legal office want to look at it real long and hard, check it for compliance, and is this going to affect anything that we're doing for patient care or anything like that. So we generally turn it off to start out with, unless we can prove that its application is a benefit. I think like what Scott said, yeah, it can write an agenda for you, it can take notes for you, but is that the best use of the product, or is that really what we need here?
Yeah, it sort of seems like it's somewhat of a marketing, hook. I mean, collaboration has come so far. I mean, we remember the old days of H23 video conferencing where, if you could barely see somebody, that was a victory. And now you've got all these different kind of tools. And when you're dealing with collaboration, what is the one piece that, when you have a meeting afterwards, you have to do notes, you have to do summary, you have to do this kind of thing. So for Zoom to sort of push it down your throat, I sort of get, yeah, we're all sick of it though, but they may be trying to reach a segment of the market that maybe is not convinced by this. And when you think about it, what else could Zoom do with its collaboration at this point that is, beyond where it is now? I mean, has it reached the apex of what it can do, of what collaboration can do? And if that's the case, you sort of, take stake on either the latest, supposedly, or greatest, even though, let's face it, meeting summary and that kind of thing is a very low level thing per se for an AI to do. And like Scott, you said, finding statistics and using it for these kinds of things where AI is much more useful, whereas for collaboration, let's face it, it seems like the summary is about as good as it gets for it. I mean, I could be wrong, but I definitely agree. It's like you're sort of shoving it down our throat and, give us something more useful. We already know that this is a good tool.
Yeah, and I mean, you see some of them where they're actually, tracking what you're saying, and you'll see websites pop up or links to websites based on what is discussed. Well, someone's directing it at some point. How do you know you're getting what you're after and not someone else's agenda who's not even involved in your event?
Yeah, the great points, because I think one of the things when I read that, Rob, I was the same way. I was like, Zoom is they're trying to grow still, and it's just not 100% sure where they can grow. So what is their point in doing this? Well, I think there's a couple points. One is to get a hold of your data, Ernie, because there's nothing more valuable right now than data, number one. And number two would be to get you hooked on something that they can then make an extra in a year or two and make you pay more. No company in the right world keeps creating more value and then gives it to you for free, right? So there's some agenda here for sure, and you just got to make sure you know that you're aware of what that agenda is.
Absolutely. I think it looked like a lot of the kind of superficial things were very much just trying to keep up with Microsoft Copilot, kind of offering things that are similar to what's offered there. The one thing that I did notice that Zoom Workplace for Education, I guess they're trying to provide add-ons for third-party data from student information systems and LMSs, which could be good and bad. I can see if the information was used in a positive way for potentially courses that are taught through Zoom to ingest some of that stuff directly into Canvas or Blackboard or something like that. I could see it being of value, but at the same time, if they're tying anything to student information services, seems just dangerous.
That's a really interesting point, Aaron. I hadn't really thought about it because as we've seen Zoom's evolution, they've always added something on. So, it was great collaboration. Faculty love it. It's simple, Zoom rooms, interactive, all this kind of stuff. And then they go and they decide to do their own phone platform, complete phone platform. And then you're sort of saying, well, what's next? Are they trying to become an LMS? Are they trying to step into that, step through that door? That's a really interesting point that you bring up. And, could it be good? Yes. Could it be bad? Yeah. But, you're like you said, they're certainly trying to find areas or a niche where they can, gain some financial, prosperity in.
Well, I get regular notices from my Zoom rep about new product offerings, how they tie in with different hardware platforms and different software platforms that can make all of our systems on campus work together better.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I definitely applaud anybody who makes those claims that are like, we can take all of this stuff and make it work for you better. Sure, you can.
I would applaud anybody who actually can make it work better, not just say they can.
True. Well, all right, gentlemen. This was another fantastic conversation and episode. And I appreciate you guys coming out month after month and joining me in these great talks. So, as per usual, Ernie, where can people reach out to you if they want to after this episode?
You can find me on LinkedIn.
And how about you, Rob?
What Ernie said, LinkedIn.
And Scott?
LinkedIn, on X, and over at Rave Pubs is where I can be found.
Excellent. And as for me, you can find me on LinkedIn, on X at Smearin_off_ice, and each month here on AVNation's EdTech podcast that can be found on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.